my raw scan here. Usually the first thing I find with the scanner tool, quite likely because I haven't figured out how to fully use it yet, but I do want to get this thing oriented so it's facing a front view. So we're sort of face to face with this mesh in ZBrush. I'm going to just try to orient this. I'm going to snap to 90-degree increments for now, but I can usually, things are going to be off a little bit at the very least. So I find alignment is helpful to try to get early on, and typically our heads will be facing more forward, where the tops of the ears line up with the brows and the bottoms of the ears will line up with the bottom of the nostril. And I'll usually hold Alt and move my pivots around just to check things. You can also try to go into symmetry mode too, so I'll sort of check, do the corners of the eyes and the mouth line up fairly well, and they seem fairly level. If they don't, you can always try tweaking or slightly rotating the head. It's not fully necessary, but I find just kind of getting your base set up pretty useful. Something else I'll do, there are gaps in the scan. This was a raw kind of laser scan, so anywhere where there's excessive beard hair or anything reflective, so hair is reflective, it didn't capture that. But yeah, for my purposes, the scan that I want to use, I'm going to actually kind of clean up the shirt too. So I usually will just go into Select Lasso and hold Control Shift Alt, and then I can kind of hide off the stuff I'm going to delete, and I'll simply go to Delete Hidden after that. Something else I will tend to do as well, I'm going to just come back to that in a minute. So go to my custom interface and go to Mesh Editing, Delete Hidden, which you can go to as well over here under Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, there. Now the pivot points in ZBrush can be a little bit kind of funky, so if they're not exact, and again, every face has asymmetry, so you may want to be a bit careful, but I would sort of say turn off symmetry and kind of pick a region where you feel like you can get a simple selection. So I usually go with the tip of the nose, but maybe, could be the center of the brows too, where this feels more sort of central to the face. We can go to Tool, sorry, not Tool, but Transform, and go to Set Pivot. So Set Pivot will position the pivot point to that visible piece of mesh. It doesn't work with masking, doesn't work with other mesh the same way, but at least this kind of becomes a bit more centered, because if you just go to the unmasked center area, it may be off a bit. I do think there might be some slight rotation issues, so we can turn up dynamic as well. Sometimes what I'll do is do a mirror and weld to sort of see, does this kind of feel right? Mirror and then mirror and weld. It feels wider this way, so if I go back to mirror, and it's sort of a little narrower, so there's maybe a slight rotational issue there, so I'm going to just try to tweak that. I'll go to mirror and weld to check it out. Now again, because the pivots are off, we want to maybe reestablish that by selecting a roughly central point and then going to clear and set pivot, and then unhiding. Okay, so let's just try mirror and weld. So that feels a bit more solid in terms of the way it's sort of mirroring over either way. I'm never going to get it perfect, so I don't need to focus on it being absolutely perfect, but I do want a pretty decent alignment to start. Mainly because when I bring in another head mesh, it's going to be pretty well centered, so I want to do as little work as possible repositioning the proportions of the other head. So I'm going to recommend, you can use, if we go under Tool inside of ZBrush, there is the, sorry, not under Tool, but under Project. There is something called the Demo Female Head, which is pretty good for standard female proportions. There is also like a Demo Male, Demo Female. By the way, these are ZPRs, ZBrush projects, under the project window. So if you double click and open it now, it'll actually fully replace the Z tool that's here. So you could use this as an opportunity to save your Z tool and load the project, or you can go to Load Tools from Project. So you can actually pull a specific tool out of a project and not have it completely replace your file. But in order to do that, you have to go into the C drive under Program Files, locate your in this case, Maxon ZBrush folder, and then you'll see the Z projects folder. And so in here there are right, kind of all the different projects that we're kind of seeing in that previewer. So yeah, there's like the male, right? The female should be in there somewhere, right there. There's the female. So those are the two that we're sort of seeing here. So in this case, I'll go with the male. And you know, depending, like I'm not, I'm okay with this one. I think it's fine. I did use a different one though, and I'll show you which one I did use. I went to Load Tool, and again under the Maxon ZBrush folder, there's a Z Tools folder, and I wound up using the Nik Human Male Average. The reason I went with this one is just that it was easier to kind of slice off the polygroups that I didn't want. So I just Control-Shift-Click on the polygroups I don't want to eliminate the rest of the body very quickly and easily. So go to Delete Hidden. Oh, this thing has layers, so you will have to delete the layers because it will prevent you from editing anything. So I just go to Delete and Delete. And then Control-Shift-Click, Control-Shift-Alt, click and drag. And we can then go to Delete Hidden. So that will leave us with this, right? Now again, we can, if you have the floor on too, it'll kind of help you see where pivots are and things of that nature. So you can also just go to Set Pivot. And like I said, what's kind of handy about this is that it does have polygroups, so that's one of the reasons I prefer to use this tool. So that I can, you know, let's say mask the eyeballs or the eyelids. I'm going to get them closed in a minute. So I'll jump back over to my scan here that I've got cleaned up. And I'll go to Subtool and hit Append. And then I'll click on the head mesh that I have here. I'll turn off Solo. I often turn Solo on. So again, I'll just go to Transform and go to Clear Pivot on the head and go back to Set Pivot. Now, one thing I will mention as well is the scale. So right now I've got my own kind of custom interface. ZBrush kind of by default, when it makes a sphere, a cube, or whatever, it makes things at about 2 centimeters scale, XYZ. So, you know, you may also want to kind of look at your positioning. I will maybe zero my position out on the head here, and I'll set my scale to 2 centimeters on XYZ. Again, if you don't have this in your interface, this is basically visible down below. Oh, where is it? I forget exactly where it is. I think maybe under Import, Export, Initialize. Anyways, I'll have to come back to that, but oh, sorry, it's under Geometry, and then I believe it's Size and Position here. Sorry. So there's the size slider and the positioning as well. So that's where those are from. Okay, so again, we'll get the new head to scale. And we can turn on the transparency ghost feature as well. So I can kind of help us see, right? Now my preference, mainly because the scan, like I said, it kind of comes in a weird, weird sort of positioning. I'm going to only move the head up and down just to position it that way, and then I'll move the scan itself to better match the reference head here. So yeah, I think I'm okay this way. So again, depending on your sort of body proportions, face proportions, you know, in this case I know I'm a bit wider built, and I'm also overweight, so I'm going to actually scale the head a bit wider in this case. I may also drop it just a touch. And so we're going very broad strokes here. I'm going to go with the move brush, and I want to try to, so again, the lips are in pretty good position. I know I've got kind of a bit of a crooked mouth, so I'm going to kind of get that in position. My nose needs to move up. So again, we want to be fairly close as much as possible. I'm going to want it projecting. So the projection will allow me to kind of get that shape in. Again, I'm going to go into symmetry. I know I've got a bit of a narrower head at the top as well. So I'm going to kind of pull that up and in. So it's really about just kind of getting an approximate shape in here. Again, wider neck in the back. So I'm holding Alt and kind of pulling this stuff wider. And as well, being a bit older as well, I've got some area of the neck hanging down a bit lower. So when, you know, these things age, age will affect all this stuff, of course, so. Oops. And again, I think because, you know, depending on the scan, you know, sometimes it kind of cut out in certain ways. Okay, let's just, can't tell. Let me go back to Ghost here. Yeah, I think I've actually, did I pull that out too far? Maybe I pulled that out too far, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just solo on the head again. So the one thing I want to do is, right now, yes, this is a mesh that is fairly clean, but I'm not too concerned with that right now. I'm going to basically just Dynamesh this, but I do want to basically get this thing closed just to get a clean base. So I'm going to inflate the lips closed. And I'll take the lower eyelids and just kind of mask the lower eyelids. Okay, so that's pretty good. Get it a solo here, and I know my eyelids are kind of closing in roughly this position. So again, it's very broad strokes. So I'm just going to pull those lids down. You know, hold Alt if you need to kind of, again, pull them kind of forward a bit. And one other thing I'll mention is the resolution as well right now is very, very low on this. So I'm going to actually divide this once or twice. And you can delete your lower division. Or you can go into, when you Dynamesh this, you can simply hit, it'll ask you actually if you want to, okay, so basically I want to make sure there is closure in the eyelids because I will Dynamesh this thing. So again, you can just go with a little bit of inflate, right? Just to make sure there's a seal. So we want to make sure there's a solid seal there. Okay, and then I'm just going to Dynamesh. So usually, now this is very, very low, the resolution. So I'm going to actually go up a little bit in resolution. You know, anywhere between like 150, 200,000 and above is fine in terms of the active points count. So 225 for me is fine right now. Let me get it a solo. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start to basically start projecting this thing. So, again, if I jump out of, yeah, let's go into project all. If we solo this, it's kind of, you know, if you get some of the splotchiness, it's basically the distance. I think the distance actually by default is 0.02. Now that's in centimeters. So if I hit project all, it will snap a lot more to that surface. Now if you get, again, splotches, it basically means that there are gaps or maybe a distance mismatch or, you know, maybe, right, where we've got areas of the scan that are missing. So I usually wind up doing smooth and then reproject. Let's get a solo again for a minute. So project all. So one other thing you can do, again, I'll use the move brush and hold Alt and kind of pull that out and then smooth it. And when you project all, it'll catch that surface because it falls within the range now, right? Okay, so again, we're just kind of trying to match distances, match proportions as best we can. So it's really a lot of back and forth with this process. And by the way, I would say, you know, when the resolution gets a certain amount, gets to be a certain intensity, like this isn't that high res, but sometimes I find the smoothing is less effective at the higher resolution. So I'll often go and use Smooth Stronger. And again, if you don't have this in your interface, you can hit the comma key, go to brush, and there's extended brushes here, and there's a folder called Smooth. And we'll go to Smooth Stronger. So I find this is very, very helpful at this stage as well because we can really radically, right? So if you get weird lumpy areas like this, for example, if you hold Shift now, it'll kind of help you average these out and look a little less, how do we say, kind of inorganic. Okay, so we'll do project all again. So I'll get into this, yeah, let's get into solo here. So again, I find a lot of times we're kind of projecting and smoothing, projecting and smoothing. So again, you can go into ghost mode, transparency mode, and if you ever want to alter that too, you can go into preferences under draw, and we can sort of change the transparency depth or amounts. So, you know, this might be helpful. You can also change the back opacity. You can even change the color as well. So this might help you kind of see or sense the depth between. So again, I may have to tweak where the distances are between the two surfaces. So again, I often do this with Alt and the move brush. So I think I'm too wide here probably. There. Too far away here. Like I said, and if you go too high, I find with the distances, that can actually also cause weird issues where you start projecting across kind of strange parts of the face that shouldn't be projected to. So the ear might project to the head and vice versa. So you'll wind up getting bigger spikes. So that's, you know, I do adjust distances, but I try my best to kind of leave them as is. Not going beyond the default size. Again, this is one of the reasons I set the scale early on as well, is that I didn't want to, you know, this is kind of ZBrush's preferred scale of working, so we want to try to work within that as much as possible. Okay, project all. So again, as you kind of pull closer and smooth and project again, like I said, that will often improve the results as we keep going. All right, so usually a little smoother, reproject. So again, this is sticking out, so I have a feeling it's just, you know, too far away. Okay, so I'm pretty close, I think, on this. I'm going to solo this. So you can see actually a lot of the details are there. The ears, I find I have to kind of do a fair bit of custom tweaking. And like I said, there, you know, the beard kind of caused some gaps. So one thing I'm going to do with this too, when you have like facial hair, you will have to probably do a little bit of like reinterpretation of what is going on there. I'm also just going to work on my neck as well. So I feel like the neck feels a bit all over the place, right? So like I'm missing, let's get out of solo for a sec. Yeah, there's the original neck. So this part has to come, I think, some amount of it. So I would say like when your projection is feeling good in some areas, but maybe not necessarily in all, what you can do, yeah, this area I think got fairly wide. We can also just project only to certain spots. So I can sort of say, okay, well, let's focus on the projection being in this region, for example. So I'll flip it around and say project all, right? So then, right, now the focus is just in that region to help me kind of figure out the rest. Same thing, like I would kind of start isolating areas for projection. There, let's just smooth that out, project all. And yeah, back here, I'll do roughly the same. I think kind of this back of the neck area as well needs a little bit of help. So I'm going to just kind of pull it wider and do project all. Project all. Now again, I'm doing this in symmetry, so I'm probably going to start to break out of symmetry just because, right, the skin, again, is not perfectly symmetrical. Also, my face, nobody's face is really perfectly symmetrical. But I want to start soloing and saying, okay, does this start to kind of line up with the rest of the body, the head, right? So broad strokes proportions are there, so that's good. I think actually my skull shape is pretty close to there. There we go. Now the thing with facial hair, like I said, if you've got that in your scan, you will have to kind of like fill in the gaps basically. So what I'm going to do is actually kind of smooth this back, and I may need to resculpt parts of this area. So I'm going to go with smooth, just regular smooth, not smooth stronger. And I'm going to just try to work this back down. And I'll probably Dynamesh as I go. Control, click, and drag there to Dynamesh. So again, I'm kind of like filling in the gaps of the interpretation a bit. And some of these areas might be kind of points that came from right, the facial hair, that sort of thing. So I'm kind of trying to imagine what this is like without or minus the facial hair, okay? Again, very kind of hard thing to do because you're imagining what what those shapes are. Now, one good thing is if you know your own face, it usually isn't as hard to do. Same thing with the brows, so I would say we want to kind of get back to a simpler base here. So I'm going to smooth this out and really just try to focus on the kind of peaks. Again, imagining the brow bone and the brow muscle underneath, trying to maintain that, okay? Yes, you can make yourself the Silver Surfer. That's right. So sometimes what I'll also do is, you know, just, like I said, rework this kind of beard area. And again, I might go to Smooth Stronger just because it will really kind of really nicely average out those shapes. So again, when you've got those kind of areas that are obscured by hair, that can be useful. Again, same thing in the head, the scalp. I'm going to just fix a bit of the kind of cranial proportion as well, just a bit. And again, doing some aggressive smoothing back there, okay? Now, you may lose some detail in the lips too. So we can go up, and I could have actually in truth started a bit higher res with Dynamesh. So I'm going to bump it up so I kind of hit 400, 500,000 polys. So I'll bump this resolution up a bit. Whoa. Maybe not that high. There we go. So what that allows you to do is kind of sculpt in. So I might retouch the lips here, right? Just to get kind of cleaner shapes. So again, from some of the smoothing, again, be careful with Smooth Stronger. I usually go back to a regular smooth because I want to kind of maintain the proportions underneath, right? So we can get out of solo mode and maybe turn off ghost mode. And like I said earlier, what you can do, so again, I've got that problem in the sculpt here. Now you can also try to smooth the sculpt out a bit as well too, in this case with the facial hair. But I'm going to go back to my my cleaner base, and what I'm going to do is actually just mask the lip area. So the lip area and the eyelid areas are two areas that are very, very distinctive. So I'm going to try to like basically project all, but just through that mask of the lips. So project all, and you see that will help snap that shape up a bit. So I can really kind of maintain that sort of overall look or identity. So right, back to dam standard here. Now, anatomically speaking, there's also right, kind of this area of the upper lip that's being lost. So I'm just going to sort of carve that in gently and hold Alt and bring that back. Again, really looking at the underlying shape and the shading. And same thing for the lips. So if I want to bring back that shape a bit, then I'm going to hold Alt and start to kind of give that upper lip its crease back, let's say, and the lower lip too. So again, if you ever feel uncertain, the great thing is you can kind of just unhide parts of the mesh and bring it back, you know, and project back. So a few other things too, right? So I lost some area here. These are, I'm going to just kind of outline a couple of common areas in the lip area. So you can reinforce the shapes by holding Alt and Dam Standard with a small amount, I would say, not this much, right? To kind of reinforce these little folds that come down from the nostril and sort of pop one in there and really soften it back. Also under the lip, typically, this isn't always true, but there is usually a bit of a fold here. Again, this is because there's a bit of a void in kind of lower lip muscle. So again, I might go with smooth stronger just to kind of like bring that back. And let's jump into perspective, because at this point, you know what, this is how we're going to view the model, is in perspective, not in some flat, non-perspective, non-foreshortening kind of model. Okay. So other kind of features, anatomical features that we typically have, is that we usually have a bit of a void as well down here coming out of the corner of the mouth, and we see that from the scan, but you can always, again, reinforce this a little bit. You'll, of course, have to check your own face, your own anatomy. The other thing, too, is that there's something called the node. The node is actually kind of like a little bulge that happens here. Because there's about, I think there's 4 different muscles that overlap and intersect at this point. So you can kind of, again, reinforce that anatomical feature and then kind of blend it back in. Now, again, you may want to use smooth strong if you're dealing with a lot of mesh, or you can kind of constantly and very subtly rework it with just a regular smooth. So I find the node is useful. And I'm also going to just outline, too, very quickly, the muscles that are here. So there is kind of a muscle group that exists this way, right? So that's one of the things that forms this little indentation from the corners of the mouth and helps form this void. There's also the kind of bony protrusion of the chin. Go a bit lower here. So I know I have for me, I've got a bit more of a dimpled chin. Oops, let me turn off the floor. So again, if you're struggling or if you have to work through facial hair from a scan, it's not uncommon. So okay, let me get rid of that V shape again. What else? What else? So yeah, you may have to reinforce again. And you can try this. Like I said, you can just mask certain areas if you're unsure and do a projectile. I'm just going, yep, there we go. So that's going to help clean things up. And I'll go with the regular smooth and, again, just kind of clean this stuff up a little bit. Probably with dam standard and some sculpting. Okay. Oh, by the way, I should keep symmetry off again because of the lack of actual symmetry in my face. And so for the eyelids too, because of the eyelashes, I would definitely go in and clean these up as well. So I'm going to go in and start to sketch this back in. So again, I think it's kind of blurry, and if we let me jump to the scan, right? So that's the eyelids there. I mean, you could even fix this a little bit if you wanted to on the scan and sort of really trace out. Oops. Again, I should turn off symmetry. So that's kind of where the upper eyelid's sort of sitting on top of the lower. So again, you can sort of smooth to one side. Again, I'm using regular smooth, not smooth stronger. So we're kind of having to imagine and go back and almost erase the eyelashes, right? So again, we can kind of work on this area. So yeah, anytime, oops, that was the wrong way. Okay, let me undo. I wanted to actually solo this projectile. And remember, I actually do want to keep my eyebrows smooth, so I'm going to just mask those out and projectile again there. So yeah, I find this kind of work is fun. It's definitely interesting. So I'm actually going up. I'm adding divisions as well as I work. Oops, what happened there? So I'm going to go in and again just kind of refine the eyelids a bit. And again, some just sort of delicate, gentle softening. So working at a higher res allows you to kind of get a little bit more kind of crisp detail. And again, any specific regions you feel like maybe are missing something, you can just mask those regions and reproject. And I'm going to show a trick just after this. So let's say I want to go to a cleaner base. My base for this is just going to be a quick Z-Remesh, no guides, no polygroups, just something so that I can try to have something that conforms to the anatomy a little bit better, right? It's hard doing this by mouse, but it's working out okay. And I know I've got crow's feet here, so as you get older, you get these finer lines. Again, I could go with a lighter dam standard, but in this case, I'm okay with the stroke being a little bit exaggerated, let's say. Okay, so drop my intensity, maybe my draw size as well for the kind of crow's feet. You know, something else I think that was a bit lost. Let's get it a solo here for a minute. Project all. All right, so in the neck region too, we often have these. There. I'm just going down in resolution, by the way. To we'll often have kind of like very subtle neck folds, crease, almost like fold lines or wrinkles from repeated bending, twisting, tilting down of the head. So if we are kind of getting into those details, I would say we can kind of come in with a very, very low intensity brush. And usually the lines are a little bit broken, so they kind of like crisscross a bit, overlap. And these are, we're not getting into full detailing of this scan. This is more just a cleanup, but if you wanted to kind of have those little like anatomical hits in the scan, then that's something we could for sure add. I'm just going with smooth stronger because I'm working at higher res, right? This is 5 million polys now, and this is just going to kind of blend or help bleed it into the rest of the face. Okay, so there. And you know, we can go across the forehead and do the same thing. We can sort of already see them just faintly at this stage. So again, we can kind of like try to carve them back in almost. And yeah, you can use your phone or use a mirror as well as a reference point. It's always useful to have that. So I know for sure I have a faint line here from, you know, when you squeeze your brows together. Another line here, more of a deep crease, right? But I think overall, I mean, that's basically a decent scan. You know, the one final thing, like I said, is probably going to be the ears. So sometimes I do wind up kind of resculpting again. The ears in this case came out kind of rough. You know, I didn't get a scan behind the ears. I'm going to go down in res. So I want to just kind of try to fix the proportion around the ears here. Behind the back of the ear. You know, there's more of a kind of a concave region, I would say, there. And then again, I'll go use my move brush and just sort of tweak and slide things around. So using, yeah, smoothing as well can be helpful, but the one problem is it can, again, kind of erase the depth on certain things. So you want to be a bit careful when you do use it. And of course, because we're dealing with thin areas like the ear, you want to be careful with by turning on back face mask. That can be fairly helpful. Okay. So again, I'm going to try to just mask this region now and just sort of see if I can get it to project. It's not too bad. And then I can hold the move brush again and hold Alt and just try to get a bit more of a cavity in there as well. Project all. And you know, I've seen this happen too, which is fine. I'm going to just, if you lose the kind of thickness of your ear, we can just simply go over that with a, just an inflate to help bring that part of the shape back. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good for that ear. Like I said, I would basically repeat the process on the other ear, but for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to move forward. Okay, so last step, like I said, what I did is I add divisions here. Okay, so I've got 3 or 2 additional divisions. There's the base res, which is about 350, 360. There's a really amazing trick. So what I typically do when I want to ZRemesh and project the detail that I've got, because this thing goes up to 5 million polys at the high end. Usually what I do is I'll kind of take this base, go to the low res, duplicate it, then ZRemesh it, project and divide. But there's an interesting hack here because I have divisions, and I can even add an additional division here. So I can say divide one more time. So let's say I go up. This is going to bring me to 23 million, which is kind of high, but my base is 360. 360,000, right? I'm going to freeze subdivisions. So what freezing does is it says, okay, let's take division 2, 3, and 4 in this case, and any fine detail at those division levels, let's store that away, hidden in the background, so we can edit the base mesh, okay? So that's what freezing is typically for, is that when you have divisions, the divisions can't track changes at the base. In this case, this is just a Dynamesh, right? So I'm going to ZRemesh this thing. I'll set it to like 30, 40,000. That's probably fine. Okay, and I'll go to ZRemesh. By the way, this often will happen. There might be some errors in here in the remeshing, so you can go into mesh editing and go to check mesh. There's some issues, fix mesh, and then I usually do an optimize because it will speed up the ZRemeshing. And again, if you don't have this in your interface, you go to Mesh Integrity, check mesh, fix mesh, and I believe under Modified Topology, there's optimize points. So that's typically my process for that. Now, if I try to ZRemesh again, I won't have an error. I can go through and process the model. Now, you can put ZRemesh guides and things of that nature. I usually would do that around the eyelids, the lips. So let it process. Now, if you're happy with the results, that's fine. By the way, if you notice here, there's actually in the regular interface, which I might add to my custom, there's a retry button. So what that means is that you can actually more quickly remesh. So let's say I want to, maybe use guides in this case for the eyelid, for example. I'm not really crazy about where the eyelid's going, so I'm going to put guides right where I think the eyelid line should be, and maybe some for the lips. It's following, but not quite the way I'd like it to. And we could turn up curve strength. You can hit retry. But in this case, I'll just hit ZRemesh. This should be fine. Yeah, I'll go back and go to the original and then put my guides there. And you can turn up guide strength. Again, for me, this isn't as important, but I just want to show you this tool because I do think it's a useful concept. And curve strength, again, that just means the curves will be more followed in the remesh. let's say we're happy with that. So like I was saying, what's interesting about this kind of method is that if you unfreeze, it brings back the subdivision levels, it brings back the proportions and all the details. So it's going to divide this level of mesh. I believe I had 3 additional divisions, so it'll divide this time 3 times. So 140 becomes 160, 160 becomes what was that, 320, 640, 640 becomes like 1.2, let's say, million, roughly. So again, it's almost like self-projecting and bringing back the levels of division. So it's kind of a bit of a hacky shortcut to duplicating, z-remeshing, and projecting between the 2 versions again. So I've got my mesh back, and like I said, once I unfroze, it brought back division levels. It does kind of keep it masked, but if you unmask it, this is it. So the detail I had on the Dynamesh version with some divisions, I brought back, and now I've got a cleaner base. So I find that just very, very handy. Now, a few other things I should have done or could have done is, maybe delete this bottom piece of mesh. And you can still do that. You can freeze it, maybe slice it off, but in this case, I'll leave it as is. I'm okay with that for now. In terms of setup, I want to show you, I'm going to go to my high res.